gesturing to a fat man in a velvet vest who stood grinning near the platform. Gambling debts, fair and square. The law says his property pays his debts, and this here giantess is all he left behind. A drunk cowboy near the front cupped his hands around his mouth. How much for a dance, Amazon? The crowd roared with laughter. Sarah's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. She'd learned years ago that her voice only made men angrier. Big Jim Morrison climbed the platform steps, his bulk making the wood groan. He walked around Sarah like she was livestock, nodding approvingly at her broad shoulders and muscled arms. Strong as an ox, he announced. Perfect for hauling or my silver mine. I'll start the bidding at $50. $50 for the freak show, someone yelled. More laughter erupted. Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment, remembering her husband Thomas lying in their bed 3 weeks ago, fever burning through him like wildfire. I'm sorry, Sarah. He'd whispered with his dying breath. I'm so sorry. She'd thought he meant sorry for leaving her alone. She hadn't known about the gambling debts until the sheriff arrived with the chains. The bidding climbed slowly. $60. $70. Each number felt like another nail in her coffin. Sarah scanned the crowd, looking for even one friendly face, one person who might see her as human instead of spectacle. That's when she spotted him. At the very back of the crowd stood a tall, quiet man in a worn black hat. Beside him, partially hidden behind his father's leg, was a small boy with sandy hair. The boy wasn't laughing. He wasn't pointing or staring at her like a curiosity. Instead, he was clutching a wooden horse to his chest, and his blue eyes held something Sarah hadn't seen in years. The boy was looking at her the way a drowning person looks at dry land. $100. Big Jim shouted, raising his meaty fist. Going once. The quiet man at the back suddenly stepped forward. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as he walked, his boots making no sound on the dusty ground. His face was weathered, kind, with the deep lines of a man who'd known real sorrow. Going twice, the auctioneer called. The man reached the platform just as the auctioneer raised his gavel for final call. Behind him, the small boy followed, still clutching his wooden horse. Wait, the man said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but something about it made the entire crowd fall silent. Even the drunk cowboys stopped their jeering. The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. He poured the contents into his palm, coins that caught the afternoon sunlight like fallen stars. $150, he said, his gray eyes never leaving Sarah's face. The crowd gasped. Big Jim's face turned purple with rage. What in the hell do you want with her, Coltrane? He snarled. The man, Coltrane, looked down at the boy beside him. The child stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the square. My son needs her, Coltrane said simply. And maybe she needs us too. The chains fell away from Sarah's wrist with a sound like thunder. She rubbed the raw flesh, feeling blood return to her fingers as Jacob Coltrane counted out his coins onto the auctioneer's trembling palm. The crowd stood frozen, unsure whether to be disappointed or fascinated by this unexpected turn. Big Jim Morrison's face had gone from purple to white. You just bought yourself a world of trouble, Coltrane, he spat. That thing ain't natural. She's cursed, mark my words. Jacob didn't even look at him. Instead, he stepped closer to Sarah, close enough that she could smell leather and sage on his clothes. Ma'am, he said quietly, tipping his hat. My name's Jacob Coltrane. This here's my boy, Tommy. Sarah looked down at the child who had followed his father through the crowd. Tommy was small for 10, with hair the color of wheat and eyes that seemed far too old for his face. He still clutched a wooden horse, and Sarah could see his hands shaking slightly. Hello, Tommy, she said, her voice soft as morning rain. The boy's eyes went wide. Most people had to crane their necks to look up at Sarah, but she knelt down in the dust, bringing herself to his level. The crowd murmured at the sight, this giant of a woman making herself small for a child. Is that your horse? She asked, nodding toward the toy. Tommy nodded quickly, then held out toward her with trembling hands. His name's Thunder, he whispered. Papa carved him for me when Mama went to heaven. Sarah felt something crack open in her chest. She took the wooden horse with gentle fingers, examining the careful craftsmanship. He's beautiful. Your papa has good hands. Tommy hasn't spoken to anyone but me in 2 years, Jacob said quietly. Not since we buried his mama. Sarah looked up at Jacob, then back at Tommy. The boy was staring at her with a mixture of wonder and desperate hope. What happened to her? Sarah asked. Fever took her in the winter of '80, Jacob replied. Tommy was 8. He watched her waste away, and when she died, his voice caught. He just stopped talking. To everyone except me. Sometimes not even to me. Sarah handed the horse back to Tommy, but instead of taking it, he stepped closer. Without warning, he reached out and touched her cheek with his small hand. You're sad too, he whispered. Like me? Tears Sarah had been holding back for weeks suddenly spilled over. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Come on, Jacob said gently. Let's get away from here. As they walked toward Jacob's wagon, the crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves. But Sarah heard the whispers following them like shadows. Unnatural, that's what she is. Poor Coltrane boy. Bad enough he lost his mama. Now he's got to live with that monster. Mark my words, no good will come of this. Sarah's shoulders tensed with each cruel word, but Tommy surprised her by slipping his small hand into hers. His fingers were warm and trusting, and suddenly the whispers didn't sting quite so much. The wagon ride to the Coltrane ranch passed in comfortable silence. Sarah sat in the back while Tommy rode between his father's knees, still stealing glances at her over his shoulder. The Arizona landscape stretched endlessly around them. Red rocks and desert sage, mountains that touched the sky like purple promises. How long since you've eaten? Jacob asked without turning around. Sarah's stomach clenched at the mention of food. 3 days, she admitted. Jacob's jaw tightened. Animals, he muttered under his breath. As they crested a small hill, Sarah saw their destination. A modest ranch house with a wraparound porch, surrounded by corrals and grazing cattle. It looked like the kind of home she'd dreamed of as a little girl, before she'd grown too tall for dreams. It's not much, Jacob said, helping her down from the wagon. But it's honest work, and there's always food on the table. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and would smoke. The furniture was simple but well-made, clearly crafted by Jacob's skilled hands. On the mantel sat a photograph of a beautiful woman with Tommy's eyes and Jacob's gentle smile. Tommy noticed Sarah looking at the picture. That's Mama, he said softly. Her name was Elizabeth. Papa says she's watching over us from heaven. Sarah knelt down again, bringing herself to Tommy's eye level. She was very beautiful. You look just like her. Tommy beamed at the compliment, then did something that made both Sarah and Jacob freeze. He wrapped his small arms around Sarah's neck in a fierce hug. I've been praying for someone like you, he whispered against her ear. Someone who knows what it's like to be different. Someone who won't leave. Over Tommy's shoulder, Sarah met Jacob's eyes. The man's expression was raw with emotion, hope and fear warring across his weathered features. I won't leave, Sarah whispered back, the words coming from somewhere deep in her soul. I promise. As Tommy pulled back, grinning wider than he had in years, Sarah realized that for the first time since Thomas died, she felt something other than grief. She felt needed. But outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. The trouble came at dawn, 3 days later. Sarah was in the kitchen, flour dust in her hands as she kneaded bread dough, when the sound of hoofbeats shattered the morning quiet. Through the window, she saw them, 6 men on horseback, led by Big Jim Morrison himself. His silver-handled pistol glinted in the early light. Jacob, she called, but he was already moving, grabbing his rifle from above the door. Tommy appeared in the hallway, still in his nightshirt, clutching thunder to his chest. What's happening? He whispered, fear creeping back into his voice. Sarah dropped to her knees, taking his small face in her flour-covered hands. Listen to me, sweetheart. I need you to hide in the root cellar like your papa taught you. Can you do that for me? Tommy's lower lip trembled. Are they here for you? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She pulled him close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair. Maybe, but I won't let anything happen to you or your papa. I promise. Sarah McKinnon. Big Jim's voice boomed from outside. Come on out. We got business to settle. Jacob appeared beside them, his face grim. Tommy, go to the cellar. Now. As the boy reluctantly disappeared into the kitchen floor, Jacob turned to Sarah. You don't have to face them. We can... No. Sarah stood to her full height, her green eyes blazing. I'm done running. She walked to the door, Jacob beside her, and stepped onto the porch. The 6 men sat their horses in a semicircle, blocking any escape. Big Jim's face was twisted with rage and something else. Humiliation at being shown up by a quiet rancher and his boy. You cost me money, McKinnon. Big Jim snarled. Had a contract to supply workers for my silver mine. Strong backs, no questions asked. You would have been perfect. She's not your property anymore, Jacob said quietly, but his voice carried steel. I paid the debt fair and square. Big Jim laughed, a sound like broken glass. Debt? Hell, Coltrane. I'm talking about something bigger than debt. That thing you're harboring ain't natural. Look at her, built like a man, tall as a tree. It ain't right. Sarah felt a familiar shame creeping up her throat, but then she remembered Tommy's small arms around her neck, his whispered prayers for someone who understood being different. You're right, she said suddenly, stepping forward. I'm not like other women. The men shifted nervously in their saddles as she continued walking toward them, her shadow stretching long across the dusty ground. I'm stronger than most men, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I can lift a full-grown steer, split firewood all day without breaking a sweat, and work circles around any hand you've got. She was close enough now to reach Big Jim's stirrup. But you know what makes me really different? I choose who I protect. And I choose this family. Quick as lightning, she grabbed Big Jim's boot and twisted. He tumbled from his horse with a cry of surprise, landing hard in the dirt. Before his men could react, Jacob's rifle was trained on them. Now hold on there, one of them stammered. We don't want no trouble. Sarah stood over Big Jim, her full height casting him in shadow. Then you'd better ride out. Because if you come back here, if you threaten this family again, you'll discover just how unnatural I can be. Big Jim scrambled to his feet, his face red with humiliation. This ain't over, McKinnon. That boy of yours is going to grow up knowing he's got a monster for a mother. The words hit like bullets. But before Sarah could respond, a small voice cut to the morning air. She's not a monster. Everyone turned. Tommy had emerged from the house, still clutching thunder, but his chin was raised in defiance. She makes the best pancakes in Arizona territory, he continued, his voice growing stronger. She reads me stories every night. She fixed my horse when his leg broke. And when I have nightmares about Mama, she holds me until I'm not scared anymore. He walked to Sarah's side, slipping his small hand into hers. She's exactly the right size to hug all of me at once. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Jacob's rifle never wavered, but she could see his own eyes glistening. Big Jim looked around at his men, then back at the unlikely family standing united before him. You're all crazy, he muttered, then hauled himself back onto his horse. As the riders disappeared in a cloud of dust, Tommy looked up at Sarah with shining eyes. Did I do good? Sarah knelt and gathered him into her arms, lifted him off the ground in a fierce hug. You did perfect, sweetheart. Perfect. Over Tommy's shoulder, she met Jacob's gaze. The man was watching them with an expression so tender it took her breath away. Sarah, he said quietly, setting down his rifle. I've been thinking, Tommy's not the only one who needs someone. She set Tommy down gently, her heart pounding. What do you mean? Jacob stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. I mean, maybe 3 people who've all known loss might make something beautiful together, if you'd be willing. Tommy grabbed both their hands, grinning up at them. Does this mean Sarah gets to stay forever? Like a real family? Sarah looked at the small boy who had taught her that being different wasn't a curse, at the man who had seen her worth when the whole world saw only a spectacle. The morning sun painted everything golden, and for the first time in her life, Sarah McKinnon felt exactly the right size. "Forever," she whispered, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like hope and home and new beginnings. In the distance, thunder nickered softly in the corral, and the Arizona wind carried away the last echoes of cruel laughter, leaving only love behind. As the golden Arizona sun sets on Sarah, Jacob, and Tommy's new beginning, we hope this story reminded you that sometimes the biggest hearts come in the most unexpected packages. Love doesn't see size, difference, or what the world calls normal, only sees the soul beneath. If this tale of courage, family, and second chances touched your heart, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another Wild West love story. These are the tales that history forgot, but the heart remembers. Stories of real people finding real love in the hardest of times. And we want to hear from you, partners. Drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Are you joining us from the dusty trails of Texas? The mountain peaks of Colorado? Maybe you're watching from across the ocean, dreaming of the American frontier. Wherever you are, you're part of our campfire circle now. Tell us, have you ever felt like Sarah, different and misunderstood? Or like Tommy, hoping for someone who gets it? Share your story. This community is built on the belief that everyone deserves to belong somewhere with someone who sees their worth. Hit that like button if you believe in love that conquers prejudice, and share this with someone who needs to remember that their differences make them special, not strange. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your spirits wild. The frontier may be gone, but the courage to love against all odds lives on in every one of us. See you on the next trail, partners. This is West Tale, where every heart finds its home.